From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Prescription drugs land more Arizonans in the emergency room than heroin does. Tonight, an in-depth look at the medical data.
President Obama announces his plan to close the Guantanamo Bay detention facility, an issue he introduced at the beginning of his presidency.
Watching him take his last breath and struggling to breathe and suffocate to death, it was more than I could bear.
And an Arizona senator is throwing her support behind the movement that would let terminal patients die with dignity.
Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News. I'm Ben Marjat.
And I'm Alexis Solari. Thanks for joining us. Tonight, Cronkite News continues our commitment to covering Arizona's heroin epidemic. Governor Doug Ducey blames much of the problem on the proliferation of prescription drugs.
Cronkite News investigative reporter Ty Scholes looked into the medical data behind these dangerous drugs.
Cronkite News has been tracking heroin's hold on Arizona since last year, but even more people are having deadly encounters with prescription drugs, landing them in emergency rooms across the state.
Brittany Pinkston was prescribed Percocet by an urgent care doctor after a hand injury.
The very first one I took, it was the best thing of my life. And I literally said, I'm going to do this every day for the rest of my life.
Within a month, she was hooked.
For over a year, I did it a lot. Because if I couldn't find any on the streets, I could easily go to urgent care and they'd prescribe them to me in a second. I knew exactly what to say. You just go in and say my back hurts and they'll give you a Percocet. I got one in the waiting room once.
It happens all the time.
So if you look at the United States, we actually represent only 5% of the world's population, and we represent 80% of the prescription drugs.
State records show that 1,052 people required emergency treatment for prescription opiate overdoses in 2014, up from 1,018 in the previous year. Heroin overdoses also continued to increase from more than 521 in 2013 to 605 in 2014.
Most drug abuse, specifically in the heroin arena, starts by using legal prescription drugs, 75% in fact. So if we can identify individuals up front who are at risk of becoming addicted, we can intervene and help them and save lives.
Dr. Dan Kwan at Maricopa Integrated Health System sees overdoses every single day.
I had one patient that said he was hurt at age 8, and that's how he got addicted to pain medication. He didn't know any better because he was so young, so he just kept escalating from there.
Nick Sanders was a pill addict too. Like many teens, he got his first pills from a friend.
When I first got high on it, I mean, it really felt like, the heavens had parted and I'd found, what I should be doing finally, like I was always anxious.
Former addicts tell Cronkite News they did whatever it took to get the drugs. Doctor shopping, even armed robbery.
But the funny thing is you think you're not that bad until you can't get the doctor to prescribe you pills. And then you're like, holy shit, this is a problem.
Sanders robbed a Walgreens.
I flash him the gun real quick, he hands me the pills, and I pretty much just walk out the fire exit.
Arizona legislators have a plan to help combat prescription drug abuse. A Senate bill sponsored by John Kavanaugh would require doctors to check a database before prescribing narcotic substances.
In order to save lives and prevent all of the accidents and crime and heartache that follows opioid overdose or intoxication, we're going to mandate it because it just has to be done.
That's the thing. You doctor shop. Any pillhead you talk to, they have doctor shop. That's the point of it. Yeah. Of course you do.
If the bill passes, it would likely be much more difficult to support a habit by doctor shopping. With the investigative team, Ty Scholes, Cronkite News.
Arizona PBS will continue our coverage of the heroin epidemic this evening. Coming up on Arizona Horizon, a look into heroin in Arizona. And tonight at 8 is the new Frontline investigation, Chasing Heroin. For more multimedia coverage on the impact of opiate addiction, how families and law enforcement agents are coping, and to watch our full investigation, go to hookedaz.cronkitenewsonline.com. Top leaders of Warren Jeff's polygamous sect are being indicted today for money laundering and food stamp fraud. 11 leaders are involved, including Lyle and Seth Jeffs, brothers of imprisoned leader Warren Jeffs. The U.S. Attorney's Office says that leaders use welfare programs, such as Utah's Nutrition Assistance Program, to divert funds for inappropriate use. Officials say court-approved actions are being carried out in Hilldale, Utah, on the Arizona border, and Salt Lake City. They would not elaborate, saying that court records in this case are sealed. One Hilldale resident described a scene with hundreds of officers around businesses in the town and said he saw at least one person in handcuffs. FLDS leaders and government officials from Hilldale, Utah and Colorado City, Arizona are already in the midst of a trial dealing with allegations that they denied housing, water services, and police protection to non-believers.
This morning, President Obama presented a plan to close the Guantanamo Bay detention facility, a goal that has been around since the beginning of his presidency. Approximately 90 people are currently detained at Gitmo. Obama's plan involves transferring the bulk of those detainees to other countries. The rest, ones deemed too dangerous to leave the country, they'll be moved to an undetermined facility in the U.S. At least 13 states are being considered as potential sites for transfers. Opposition to the plan was quick, but Obama dismissed it, saying the issue had bipartisan support when it was initially suggested.
Unfortunately, during that period where we were putting the pieces in place to close it, what had previously been bipartisan support suddenly became a partisan issue. Suddenly, many who previously had said it should be closed backed off because they were worried about the politics.
The presidential candidates were quick to react, with Senator Marco Rubio saying the closure of Guantanamo was not an option, and Senator Ted Cruz saying it would be an insult to the families of those who lost their lives fighting terrorism.
You wake up this morning to the news that the president is planning to close Guantanamo, maybe even giving it back to the Cuban government. This makes no sense to me.
How on earth does any president look in the eyes of a mother or father whose son or daughter lost their lives capturing these terrorists and justify, we're going to release them again?
The GOP candidates are in Nevada today, battling for the win in the Nevada caucus. Voting closes at 8 tonight. Trump dominated the polls leading up to today, and Cruz and Rubio are expected to be in a tight race for second. Voter turnout in Nevada is notoriously low. Only 7% of registered voters showed up in 2012. Roughly the same amount is expected today.
Forget the word caucus, just go out and vote, okay?
If we nominate someone that half of the Republican Party hates, we're going to be fighting against each other all the way to November. We will never win that way.
A win for Donald Trump would make it his third straight over his GOP rivals, while Cruz is fighting to get back in contention after a third-place finish in South Carolina. This is the last caucus before Super Tuesday, 1 week from now.
Customs officers are testing new biometric technology that tracks people leaving the country. Reporter Clara Benitez went to the border crossing in California, where the new technology is now in use.
This new biometric technology is being conducted in 2 phases. The first phase was in December, when non-U.S. citizens entering the country had to provide biometric data. Now the test is in its second phase, tracking all the travelers that leave the U.S.
People leaving the country and entering Mexico at the Otay Mesa pedestrian border crossing now have to go through new biometric screening if they are not U.S. citizens.
The majority of the technology is meant to be minimally intrusive on the traveler, and most processes take anywhere between 1 to 7 seconds, with the longest process probably taking about 10 seconds on the kiosk for a non-U.S. traveler.
The test is part of a congressional mandate to record entries and exits to help track foreigners who might have overstayed their visas. Officers are testing 2 machines. After scanning their immigration document or passport, travelers pause and look at a camera on the wall, which will capture an image of their face and iris. Another machine captures an image of the person's face and iris while they're walking towards Mexico.
I think this is good because that means there is more protection for travelers. It's a personal protection for everyone to prevent identity theft.
Over 9,000 people enter the U.S. daily using this pedestrian crossing. And now with this new technology, U.S. Customs and Border Protection hope to have data on people who are entering into Mexico.
And ultimately, the goal would be to match a person's entry into the United States with their exit from the United States.
All to improve border security and better track those who are entering and leaving the country.
Until May of this year, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. All of the data collected will be used for research and evaluations. In the broadcast center, Claire Benitez, Cronkite News.
According to a recent poll, more than half of Arizonans support right-to-die legislation. So one state senator is working to make so-called death with dignity legal in the state, but she's facing immense opposition in the legislature.
When I sat there holding his hand and watching him take his last breath and struggling to breathe and suffocate to death, it was more than I could bear.
State Senator Barbara McGuire knows full well how agonizing the final days can be for patients who are terminally ill. Her father passed away from chronic lung disease. She still keeps a picture of him on her desk in the Senate chamber.
He's a great inspiration to me, even though he's gone.
And he's one of the reasons she's sponsoring Senate Bill 1136, which would legalize physician-assisted suicide for patients with less than 6 months to live.
When there is no quality of life, I don't think that they should be subjected to having to go through torturous suffering.
A Behavior Research Center poll done late last year showed 56% of Arizonans would support this legislation. Dennis Flaherty, who himself has a terminally ill diagnosis, counts himself among the majority.
There's no recovery. There's no cure. It's not reversible. There's no hope. So why don't I have the option of going out with some dignity?
But Senate Bill 1136 and similar bills in the past have stalled in the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. Senator Nancy Bardo, the chairwoman, did not want to be interviewed on camera for this story, but did say this in a statement. The so-called right to die may soon become a duty to die, as our seniors, disabled, and depressed family members are pressured or coerced into ending their lives. Pro-life groups agree.
What they're trying to do here is kill the patient before God is willing to call them.
Senator McGuire told me that if the bill doesn't pass committee, which she said is more than likely what will happen, she'll hold a public hearing on the issue sometime in March. One ASU student is making an impact this Black History Month.
Coming up on Cronkite News, the Still I Rise mural is finished, and it's creating a rather emotional response.
And a Phoenix church once hosted one of the nation's biggest civil rights leaders. Find out where one woman found video of the historic moment.
We are here tonight to explore tough issues.
You've got to have people around you who aren't just laying rose petals in front of your way. And I kid you not, this is true.
Trust is everything.
This has been so much fun.
It's about reaching people.
There are more players on the world stage. The issues are more complex.
We ask the questions that take us closer to the truth.
What happened and what might happen.
Because that's what we do.
Would you like doing something like I do?
I couldn't do this. I'm not qualified.
I was thinking exactly the same thing.
Phoenix is not known as a center of civil rights activism, but a church in the valley had one of the most noted leaders deliver a sermon there. Cronkite News reporter Alexis Dominguez gives us a look into the rich history of the Tanner Chapel.
Historic Tanner AME Church is the oldest African-American church in the state of Arizona. Reverend Benjamin Thomas Sr., pastor of the church, says Tanner has always been a part in the civil rights movement.
And this is where we met, this is where we organized, accomplished to impact and improve the lives of people of color.
Tanner is the only church in Arizona where Martin Luther King Jr. is known to have given a sermon.
Dr. King had an opportunity to preach at historic Tanner AME Church. They had a meeting here, and this church was the only place that he had an opportunity other than ASU to come and actually be a part of and set up a community meeting.
Dr. King spoke for 5 minutes in front of NAACP members.
I can assure you that it is a privilege to be in the city of Phoenix and the state of Arizona.
King went on to speak about racial injustice as a national problem.
In a real sense, if this problem is to be solved, people of goodwill all over the nation must come to see that racial injustice is wrong.
Reverend Thomas Sr. says he is proud to be a pastor in such a hallowed place.
It started right here, and we do have information to verify the fact that he was alive and here and well. So.
The Tanner Historic Chapel was granted a designated historic landmark in 2015 and is the first African-American church in Arizona with this recognition. In Phoenix, Alexis Dominguez, Cronkite News.
The Martin Luther King audio you just heard came from a reel that cost $3 at a Goodwill. People often go to Goodwill looking for hidden treasures, and Mary Scanlon was no exception. Scanlon collects records and was looking to find something intriguing to add to her collection. But Scanlon didn't realize that she was going to find a piece of Arizona's history and the civil rights movement. Scanlon was at Goodwill near 32nd Street and Thomas Road, where she came across reels in a box. The reels included audio and photos that show that Martin Luther King Jr. was in Phoenix.
As it happened, the very first one that I picked up had written on the side of it something like Martin Luther King, Tempe, Arizona, 1964. And that was really fortuitous because all the rest of them, for the most part, either didn't have writing on them at all, or they said Lincoln Ragsdale on them. And that was a name that at the time I didn't recognize.
Scanlon donated the footage to ASU, and you can find a copy at the ASU library.
New statistics show that Black-owned businesses grew at a rapid pace during the recession, especially here in Arizona. Cronkite News reporter Samantha Witherwax is live with the details.
The recession hurt most Americans, but maybe not one sector. Black-owned businesses increased nationally, but even more so in Arizona.
The reason for the explosive growth during that time period is at the same time we were experiencing the government and the financial markets contracting and putting a lot of folks out of work.
The Census Bureau said that Black-owned businesses grew 34% nationally between 2007 and 2012, and Arizona almost doubled that with an increase of 51%. Carl Brown at Howard University says the increase can also be credited to a younger generation joining in.
Baby boomers are starting to retire, and a lot of them that have businesses are looking for someone to take over their business.
Kerwin Brown, president and CEO of the Black Chamber of Arizona, also says that retirement is part of the reason for the spike.
A lot of very well-educated, very passionate people that formerly were part of the corporate world were possibly displaced or taken early retirement. I think that could be certainly a part of our percentage increase.
While there may have been a silver lining to the recession, there is still a cloud hanging over Black-owned businesses. African Americans continue to be underrepresented among business owners compared to the overall Black population. Carl Brown says Black-owned businesses may be peaking.
I think we'll see a leveling off because now the government is hiring and private sector is hiring.
Carl Brown also believes that the nature of our economy will come back into play soon.
Right now we're in a growth spurt, and after growth comes what? A recession.
Just as cycles go down, they are certain to come back up, leaving these two experts optimistic for the future of Black-owned businesses. Live in Washington, Samantha Witherwax, Cronkite News.
An ASU student's mural for Black History Month is sparking much emotion throughout the campus. Cronkite News reporter Lauren Ashley spoke with students about the piece.
After working over 4 days, the mural is finally complete. The Still I Rise mural, designed by ASU Kyra Trent, has impacted the campus. Corey Gray, an ASU student from St. Louis, Missouri, cried when she first saw the mural.
It was a great gesture because you really don't know what other people outside of your city feel about it. So being here, being away from all of my family, being away from pretty much everybody I know, and having this to remind you of your city, it it makes me happy.
Inside of the words I rise are names like Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, those who have lost their lives to injustice, and those who are fighting for equality among everyone. ASU student Ninette Gonzalez felt hopeful that people like Kyra are making statements through her art.
There was more things like this, you know, just more messages, not just in 1 month, but let's say like all the time. You know?
Kyra wanted to spark healthy conversation, and that's what happened. Students from South America stood around, took pictures, and asked Kyra about who the person was.
Learned a lot about myself. I learned that I had a drive to want to start conversations. I don't know that I was all the way prepared to know what conversations were going to start.
Kyra left some blank areas open, inviting students to come and fill in names of people deserving to take their place here. In Glendale, Lauren Ashley, Cronkite News.
You might use cursive to sign your name, but how often do you use it in other situations?
Coming up on Cronkite News, from keyboards to paper, how a new bill could make cursive a requirement for Arizona schools.
Plus, spring is in the air as the Cactus League gets underway. Why baseball is more than just a game for many Valley cities.
For only the third time in the award's 74-year history, a Phoenix-based news operation wins the prestigious Alfred I. DuPont Columbia Award for Excellence in Broadcast Journalism. And this year, that news operation is Cronkite News, the news division of Arizona PBS, honored for its work on the groundbreaking documentary, Hooked, Tracking Heroin's Hold on Arizona. Cronkite News at Arizona PBS, award-winning journalism you can count on from the station you trust.
With today's technology, typing is the main way we write. While writing in cursive is something many of us rarely do besides maybe a signature here and there, Cronkite News reporter Amanda Kukula went to Lake Havasu City to show us how cursive may make its way back into Arizona schools.
I think that everyone should be taught cursive.
But it's not required. Cursive is not part of the Common Core curriculum that was implemented in Arizona schools in 2010. Senate Bill 1197 would change that, and students would have to learn cursive reading and writing.
I like to write in cursive because there's a ton of loop-de-loops and twists in it.
Third grade teacher Teresa Nigg makes sure her students at Starline Elementary in Lake Havasu City still learn cursive.
I think it's a great idea because there's lots of research that cursive writing has linked to developing memory and fine motor skills.
Although Ms. Nigg says keyboarding skills are important as well, her students would be crushed if they never got the chance to learn it.
Because typewriting is easier and cursive is more challenging, and I like more challenging things. Because I'm used to writing print over and over again, and it's a change.
Starline Elementary is just one of the schools in Arizona to still teach their students cursive reading and writing. But by putting this bill into place, it will soon require all schools across Arizona to teach their students cursive by the end of 5th grade. And it's also important to the Arizona Department of Education and the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Diane Douglas.
She sees it as being more than just being able to sign your name, being able to read historical documents, but there are connections that can be made for students when they're writing in cursive that are different from the connections you make when you're writing just standard script.
In a recent amendment, cursive would not be part of the statewide achievement testing if the bill is passed. In Lake Havasu City, Amanda Kukla, Cronkite News.
To fans, spring training means baseball is back, but to host cities, it's all about the economic draw. Christina Vicario tells us how some stadiums have made vast developments in order to make sure fans stay in their cities long after the game.
Many of the 10 ballparks hosting spring training over the next month and a half here in the Valley were built to be centerpieces of economic development for the lands immediately surrounding them. One of the pioneers in this trend, the Peoria Sports Complex, spring training home of the Seattle Mariners and San Diego Padres since 1994.
It's certainly made private entrepreneurs want to be here because it's just so conducive to having, a lot of excitement and energy and entertainment. Entertainment begets entertainment. And so it really helped a lot. They both helped each other.
Nearly 1.9 million fans attended Cactus League games in 2015. This generated $809 million in economic impact for the state, according to studies commissioned by the Cactus League.
I would argue that for all the venues, there's positive growth. It's accurate to say that some areas have grown faster than others, but it has been uniformly positive.
One venue still awaiting significant growth beyond its fences, Goodyear Ballpark, where the Cleveland Indians and Cincinnati Reds train.
Several of the ballparks got finished in the late 2000s. The Great Recession was in the late 2000s. So it was one of timing where did everything happen as we originally intended? Not quite. But what has happened is growth is happening here.
Development is expected soon, with the planned 5-story Aloft Hotel just beyond center field, a first step towards a model that has proven successful for Peoria.
If you own the land, you can say, developers, come here, we will help you, we will partner with you. We have open arms for you to come here and spur more development.
Peoria continues its blueprint to expand as the city hopes to keep even more diehard baseball fans within city borders. In Peoria, I'm Christina Vicario, Cronkite News.
Our Cronkite Sports Department dug deep into the big business of spring training here in the Valley. For our full multimedia reports, visit cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
Cronkite News is proud to be the news division of Arizona PBS. Here's what's coming up on Arizona Horizon and PBS NewsHour.
On the next Arizona Horizon, we'll get an overview of the heroin problem in the state with the director of the Arizona Department of Health Services. And we'll hear about the latest efforts to fight tax filing fraud. That's the next Arizona Horizon.
I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the next NewsHour, Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker on how opioid addiction has ravaged his state. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us.
For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.